The other week I went to Croatia with my family for vacation, but I spent most of the time in the bath. That's because I found this game that I got absolutely obsessed with. That game is Cult of the Lamb. So a friend of mine basically explained it as Animal Crossing meets Hades meets Midsommar, and that got me hooked. So I wanted to make a lamb. So I started off thinking that I was just going to make some small little keychain, a gift for the friend that I mentioned introduced this to me, but didn't turn out so well. You can see here I use hot tea mugs to loosen up polymer clay when it's a bit cold, and it actually does help quite a bit to keep it from getting too crumbly. This clay is Fimo. The white clay is called Fimo, and the gray clay is just super Sculpty. Sometimes I mix them together, but usually I'll just use one or the other since they have pretty different consistencies, and I can use them for different reasons. It's about at this point I realized that maybe working smaller was not the right idea. The friend that I wanted to give this to was visiting in less than 24 hours, and working smaller is not always working faster. So after finicking with this for a while, I decided to say, screw it, this is too small. So let's try something else. Okay, so this would work a bit better. It's a bit bigger than a keychain, so I think I can manage this. So as I'm placing these little dots to try to place where I want the eye holes to be for the eyes, I realized that the ruler that I'm using actually has holes that are the perfect size for the holes that I need the eyeballs to sit in. So all that work for nothing. But there's a lot of that in this video, so get ready. Okay. Scraped out and looking absolutely terrifying are the eye holes where I will put the eyeballs. And yeah, so far so good. So after getting the head shape basically where I want it to start, I start working on the crown. So I'm rolling out a piece of clay, just getting it flat and as even as I can, to then turn it into a rectangular shape, little by little. And once that's done, I can then cut it and put it around a circular cookie cutter that I have that I think would be a pretty good shape for the crown itself. So once that's ready, I'll lift it up and place it on the cookie cutter. So I slowly start to roll it around the cookie cutter and I realized that maybe one turnaround is probably not going to be strong enough, so I roll it a second time around so that it is nice and strong. After removing some excess clay, I'm left with a pretty crown-like shape. I just remove a little bit of overhang to make sure that I can get it as flush as possible. And once that's done, I can smooth it out and start making the crown. One thing that I didn't think about after baking this is how I was going to get that cookie cutter out of there so that I can use it again on future projects. That was kind of an afterthought, and one that ended up taking quite a lot of time. So word to anyone doing this, if you are going to do any sort of similar shape where you bake something around one of your tools, maybe line it with, I don't know, Vaseline or even aluminum foil that you can pull. That would make it a lot easier for you. Just trust me on that. And now it's eyeball time. So one eyeball goes in, almost, and second eyeball goes in. I'll work them out. They'll be even. There you go, even. Took a bit of time, and now I'm just cleaning up around it to make sure that there's no extra white clay anywhere except in the eyes. doesn't really matter since I'm going to be painting this anyway, but for my sake, having it color coordinated helps, just getting everything in the right place. So even now, while I'm working on the crown, that cookie cutter is still in there. So yeah, don't do what I did. All right, a little bit more sanding to make sure that the eyeballs are smooth, as eyeballs should be. And then it's time to add some wool. So the lamb is going to have, obviously, a good bit of wool around him. So just working on that a little bit. It's all very rough to start. I can fix things later. I can chop bits off later. But this way I can at least start figuring out where things go, like the ears, knowing the right placement of them, so that once it comes time to add a bit more bulbousy wooliness, I don't get in the way of that. And here we see the cookie cutter again, still hidden in there. I'm just acting like it never happened, hoping that I'll be able to pull it out eventually. I did. It just took a little time. So, yeah, working on the crown, getting it exactly crown-like as I had hoped, and then moving on to the body. So, a quick word, I made a mistake here by putting one long wire through the head, through the body, down through what I was hoping to be the foot into the stand, but that didn't work out very well. Any movement anywhere on the clay, especially when it's warm, warped any other part of the body, which caused some cracking. So maybe do that in pieces next time. Note for you and for me in the future as well. And now I'm just finishing up his horns, just curling them a little bit, and now starting to place the blobs of wool all over his head. Really not sticking to any one particular pattern, just whatever kind of looks and feels right. This took a lot longer than I thought, and also you can probably notice that any single bit of fur or dust in the air loves to stick to this clay. So if you're working with any sort of white clay and you have multiple animals in the house, yeah, maybe paint it. A lot of this I know that I can either sand off, or I can cut off, or I can add to. So each little bit that I add, it's not something that I feel I have to commit to. So it's something that I can kind of experiment with a bit and see if it looks right, or if I need to add something somewhere, if I need to smooth something out, if I need to fix anything. I guess that's one of the joys of the medium, is that you don't really have to commit to anything if you don't want. You can change everything from the ground up. So now I'm testing out the crown to see if it will fit where I want it to, and I realized that he's missing his bangs. So next step, bangs. So adding a few little blobs of clay to be his bangs. One by one, just seeing if it looks right or if I need to add more. I think in the end I gave him quite some luscious locks for bangs, but I'm pretty happy with the way it looks, so I'm gonna move forward with this. So the sword I've been working on, and I'm just kind of smoothing out some rough edges, just trying to make sure that it is even on both sides. I guess you'll see that in a bit, what it looks like when it's done. And here is the blobby body of him before I start adding anything else. I found out that if you go to hardware stores and look for these kind of stair covers when you're building stairs, you can buy these little wooden blocks that kind of look like platforms for super cheap that work really well for placing sculptures on. So I decided this is what I wanted him to be placed on. I used some cosplay to make the cape. I don't have a video of that, but trust me, I did. This was my first time using cosplay, and I already love it, because if you can see, I've already had some cracking in areas with just the Sculpey and Fimo, because it's not as forgiving as cosplay when it comes to bending. So this is what it looks like so far before we move on to painting and any last final touch-up work. Oh, right, his collar. So he still needs a collar and he still needs a bell. So here I am just getting the collar in place. Might have been easier to do before I put his head on his body, but I think it came out pretty okay. So here it is prior to getting primed and painted. And here he is once he's been primed. Don't actually know if I needed to do this. I've painted on polymer clay directly before, but for some reason I just wanted to try to do it primed first. But here's where you can see some of the prettiest footage I took with my camera, but some of the biggest blunders that I made with my sculpt. So I just bought an airbrush and I'm really excited to start using it, but I've never used one before. And as you can see, I don't know what I'm doing. I completely screwed this up, like really badly. I put the PSI too high, I held the airbrush way too close, and I realized that I already diluted water airbrush paint, which I didn't need to do. So this was a failure, but I'm all for learning from failures, so I'm keeping it in. Also because I think, as bad as it looks, the quality is probably some of the best in this video. So back to acrylic painting, something that I do know how to do. And as painstaking as it can be with smaller pieces, when you have shaky hands and poor eyesight, I start chipping away at painting the lamb. Little smudges here and there I don't really care too much about at this point. As you can see, it takes a layer or two before I get it to look as smooth as I'd like, and I know I can go back and do touch-up work. So yeah, definitely more in my comfort zone just painting on. So here's a little skull I made for the stand to be underneath him, and I'm using the same purple I used to paint the lamb in the eye sockets and nose for this skull, which I think turned out pretty okay. This was actually one thing that the airbrush did work well on, since it had some cracks on it. I think it looked okay at the end. So I guess not a complete failure with the airbrush. Same thing with some spare bones. I put some paint on and kind of just did a wet wash to get rid of some, and then just dabbed it away so that you can see a bit of variety in color when it comes to the different crevices of the bones. So now it's time to paint the crown. One thing I like doing with all of my sculptures is to start painting the darkest colors first. That way it's a bit easier for me to cover up any little mistakes that might cross over to other parts of the sculpt initially, than to come back around and have something really nicely painted in light colors and then try to fix it. So I usually try to go from darkest to lightest. That's just my preference with the types of paints that I use. As you can see, some are great at applying, others are not as great. So still learning here, guys. All right, that's starting to look okay, I think. So now we move on to the cape. Now for the cape, I put two different reds down. I put a bit of a brighter one down first before I opted for a darker color after. I think the white primer was just making the red look a little too bright. So I put another coat on after, which I was pretty happy with. right. After getting all that kind of set up, I moved on to his ears, which I actually forgot to do the first time around. I was too busy fixing all of the airbrush splatters that I had put on him before. So now he has his ears looking like ears. Next up is his sword. The paint I have is a little thick, so after putting on the first coat, I use a wet brush to just kind of smooth it out so that the texture is pretty uniform. And with that, I'm pretty happy with it. So here's a quick look at what he looks like with some of the base colors down before adding more detail work, like the secondary layer of red, which I think definitely makes it look more red and less orange. Also, since I did such a disservice to his wool, I put another layer of paint on top of yet another layer of paint on top of another. He went through about 4 passes of paint on his wool until I got it somewhere that I liked. I decided for the stand to have it be red with black sides, just to have it be a bit more fitting for the game. You'll see what it looks like at the end. And now to show off my super shaky hands trying to make the fin details on his cape. This was not easy. It might have been easy if I was just holding it way up close to myself, but trying to record it and do these lines, not the easiest thing in the world, but it came out okay in the end. And now for the super shakiest part, the pupil on the crown, followed by the pupils on the lamb. This was not easy. It's starting to come together. There's still more detail I need to finish these up, but at least he's looking somewhere now instead of into the void. And for the cuteness factor, here is the little bit of shine on his eyes. Followed by a drop of UV resin for each eye to keep them shiny. And quickly move it around. Nice. When working with UV resin, time is definitely a factor. So you don't have a whole lot of time to get things where you want it. And you have to blast it with an UV light so that it can hold in place. But once it does, it looks great. Now just a quick and dirty summoning circle used with the bottom of a glass and a pencil to mark out the circle that I want to paint. And once I have the circle made, then I can start adding bits of the star or the goat. There we go. Just a bit of dirty line work. This is not meant to be super straight. In fact, I went back and made it a bit more jagged later. That's what it looks like. And for the final little detail on our little lamb is his mouth. Just a tiny little U. There we go. Putting the bones on the display, and he's ready. If you made it this far, thank you. This is my first time making one of these, and hopefully not the last. This was a lot of fun to make, and I hope that my skills improve over time. I hope that whatever I show you, you learn from something from, and I hope whatever it is that you want to try to do yourself, be it a hobby or a skill, I hope you go for it, and I hope you share it with other people. So to be cliche, if you liked this video, go ahead and like and subscribe, or share it with someone else that you think might like it. If you have any questions on any of my process or tools, feel free to ask in the comments below. Yeah, thanks for being here. I look forward to making more of these and sharing them with you soon. Have a great day.